Hey, it's Ron at the Radiologic Technologist.com blog, YouTube channel, Instagram, Twitter, everything else. I have another set of questions that I thought I'd address on video because they're fairly common questions, and I haven't posted anything in a week or two. So let's reduce some windows here. You cannot minimize Zoom when you are recording a meeting. Well, fine. How about that one? Okay, this comes from, we'll just say initials AM. I am a 25-year-old female. I completed 1 year of school at XYZ school. Since then, I dropped out and went straight into the workforce. I have been working in a healthcare setting for about 5 years now. I worked at an assisted living facility, and I currently work at a group home for individuals with intellectual disabilities. Bless you for that. Been at this job for 3 years now. I live on my own in my own apartment. I have my own reliable car. I have to pay rent and a care payment every month, plus all my other bills. I am proud of myself for being independent and being able to work enough for myself. As you can imagine, I have to do a lot of menial things at my current job, like wiping butts and that kind of stuff. Her words, not mine, although those would be my words too. And sadly, I'm not proud of what I do. You should be proud of what you do, but we'll keep going. I want a job and a career where I can feel proud. I don't want to work in a group home for my whole life. I know I am better than this job. I know I am too smart to do these lowly type jobs for my whole life. I want a career and I want to be proud of what I do. Let me just say, and there's more, but let me just say, because I'll forget if I don't address it now. Um, you have to start somewhere, and everything is a learning experience, right? These lowly things, choice of words, maybe, these are requirements. There's a lot of X-ray programs that require you to become, well, let me say there's a lot of nursing programs that require you to do CNA or LPN before you go into RN. And it's just a way of introducing you to some of the basic skill sets. Um, I read just the other day there's someone applying to an X-ray program and it requires them to be an LPT or a limited practice tech first, which I'm not so sure I agree with. That kind of sounds like a money grab by the school. But all of these things that you do before the next level, the next job, the next school, the next phase in your life, all these things are learning experiences that just make you understand things in a broader sense. Like I spent 10 years in the lab doing phlebotomy and things like that. And that was a great foundation to move into radiology because the lab, being a phlebotomist allows you to visit the entire hospital to draw blood because you draw blood everywhere. It allows you to understand that tests are performed to find out what's wrong with patients, and they're done in thousands of different ways. So, don't think of the CNA job as a waste of time or something along those levels, because you're actually learning very basic levels of care. When I was in X-ray school, I actually figured out how to pull 216s on the weekend so that I can go to school during the week. And that was possible in a job called ICU tech. I was a tech or a helper in an ICU intensive care unit. And really, it was kind of similar to a CNA. It was really less formal. It was more of just being a helper. And I would do things like roll patients while nurses cleaned them up, helping change bed linens, just basic things like that. And that gave me exposure to what nurses do. It gave me exposure to what patients in the ICU are like. Gave me exposure to the whole, cleaning a patient and turning them, and that applying cream to wounds and that kind of thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is to try to be thankful and appreciate these things that you're learning in these jobs that are leading up to the career that you're looking forward to having, if that makes sense. So I digress. Therefore, I've been seriously thinking about going back to school while I work full time. I want a degree in radiology because I enjoy the healthcare field and I have the most experience with it. I like helping people and I also like technology in general. I think a career in radiology will make me proud of the work I do. I have two main questions for you. So let me back up. So I think a career in radiology will make me proud of the work I do. You have to find pride in what you do, regardless of what it is, really. I mean, can you have a job and not be happy with it? Absolutely. All of us have had jobs we didn't like. But I want you to understand that you have value in that job because, for one, you're doing it. You're showing up, you're clocking in, you're doing the job, you're providing a very necessary skill to the healthcare environment. You absolutely have value and should take some sense of solace or pride in the fact that you're providing a much needed service to both the patient, the coworker, the facility, the community. So, think about that. I think a career in radiology will make me proud of the work I do. See if you can define what that really means to you. What does it mean to you to be proud of what you do? I feel like what you're saying, if I read between the lines, is you're capable of providing a higher level of care because wiping butts, as you said, may not feel important, but it is, I assure you. And there's only a few people in healthcare that do that. I know as techs, as rad techs, we run from it. We will quickly call for an ER nurse and tell them they've got a patient on our table that soiled themselves. I mean, a competent tech can take care of that, but and you're not incompetent if you don't. If we just some of us are in radiology because we can't handle, like mucus. I can't stand the sound of suctioning mucus. I could not be a respiratory therapist to save my life. It gags me to hear those sounds. So the other thing you said is that you like technology in general. That's very important in the field of radiologic technology because we are neck deep in technology. You absolutely, if you're, because I've seen techs that don't handle change well, aren't technologically savvy, some may say, and they really struggle every time there's a new X-ray machine purchased or new protocols established or something changes. They just flip out, have a hard time adjusting, have to constantly be recoached. So I think you're on the right track because you've identified that you like healthcare, you like technology, and you've had some experience with radiology. You don't really say what it is, but you said you've had some experience with it. So let's move on to your two main questions. My first question is, how do I work full time and also get my degree? So I always reference people back to my blog because I've written over 200 articles there, and that's one of the ones I touched on early on. And on the YouTube channel where we're at right now, I've taken a lot of those articles and converted them to videos, but I've also done a lot of these Q&As and I've done a lot of live sessions where I just take questions live. So you can kind of try to filter those with the search feature and find that. But I can tell you, how do I work full time and get my degree? Any way you can. You will find employers that do not want to work with a school schedule. Those are the ones you want to try to avoid. You may not be able to avoid that. You may be stuck with a particular employer. But I can tell you that if you can't get time off for school, you can't do both. You have to have a work schedule that works with your school schedule. Now, the way to reverse engineer that is how do I get a school schedule that works with my work schedule? And you really can't change the school schedule much. It's the work schedule that has to be changed around the school schedule. And I say that because most schools are 8 to 5 or 8 to 3 or 7 to 3, whatever you want to call it. There are some evening classes. There are some X-ray schools that do evening classes. But besides the classwork, you also have the clinical rotations, and the clinical rotations, and things have changed a lot over the years. Remember, I've been in this over 25 years, and when it started, we were not allowed to work past 10 or 11 o'clock at night as students, but I'm pretty sure that's changed now. So you're going to have to it's probably See, both are important, right? Work and school. They're both, you got to have the job to pay the bills and probably pay for the school, but you got to go to school to raise your per hour worth so that you can make more money. So here's how I did it. I started off working let me think back. I worked the night shift on a floor in a hospital, and I was called a health unit coordinator, a hook. And really, we were just the secretary at the front of the desk on each floor that, when doctors would donate charts and throw them up on the counter, we pulled them down and went through and made sure, whatever they did, we then handed it off to the nurse, or we restocked the charts with new blank pages, or made phone calls to doctors based on other doctors. And we were just we were the health unit coordinator. So I did that from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then school started at 7 or 8. And there was a semester or two where I literally went out to my truck and slept in the truck in the parking lot of the hospital, and then came back in. And there were some comments made from time to time from my clinical instructors. They would report back to my school, he seems awful tired, he's a little sluggish. And I'm like, yeah, because this is the real world and I'm having to work and go to school. But I also, another job that I had, like I mentioned a minute ago, was the weekend ICU tech job, which was 216. So that's 32 hours. That's considered full time. And then that cleared me up to do everything for school all during the week. There was and then when you get into clinical rotations, and I talk about this on my blog, and it's going to be in my new survival guidebook that I'm working on. I'm working on the videos right now, the Xray Tech Survival Guide, where I talk about you can absolutely research your clinical rotations before you go into them. Now, it depends on your school, and some schools have set rotations and you have to do whatever they tell you, meaning your school may only have rotations at 3 different places, a hospital, a clinic, and an outpatient imaging center or whatever, and every student rotates through all 3 like clockwork. Or in a facility like mine, Pima Medical Institute in Arizona, they had 30 different clinical locations to choose from. And so in my class, in my X-ray class, the way they handled it was they put everybody's name in a hat on a piece of paper, and they drew them out one at a time. And whenever they drew your name, you went up to the board, and they had all the clinical sites written on the board, and you wrote your initials by the 1 or 2 that you got to pick. I think we got to pick 2 each. So I researched ahead of time who had what available, and I found a hospital that was close, because they had hospitals that were 3 hours away. But I found one that offered weekend clinicals, and I jumped on that. And so your question is, how do I work full time and get my degree? You have to apply to the school. And this is one of the things I always tell people that fret or worry about, how am I going to do this? How am I going to handle it? How am I going to raise a family while I go to school? Whatever. Apply to the school, because if you don't get in, it doesn't matter. Apply to the school and be ready to, have your contingencies about what you're going to do, like we're talking about right now. But I wouldn't stress out over it, because if you don't get in, it doesn't matter how much you stressed out or planned. So step 1, just apply to the program and get that ball rolling. Then after you've got that in motion, then start figuring out, okay, that school has class from 8 to 3, Monday through Thursday. Like mine was class Monday through Thursday with a clinical day on Friday, the first semester, because they're barely introducing you to the clinical world at first. Then every semester after that, it was 4 days a week of clinicals, a 1 day a week of class. So figure out what your school requires. If it's 8 to 3 Monday through Friday, then you're going to have to find a job that's second or third shift or weekend shift. And sometimes it's going to butt up to, right next to going back to school, or you're going to get off your shift at work and go right into school. and so the schools will tell you that you can't do that. You can't work while you go to school, but they're kind of being half, I don't want to say half honest, because they're not being dishonest. What they're projecting is a perfect world. They want all their students to not work so that their students can spend all their time studying, so that they can get the best grades possible, so that the school looks good that their students are doing so well. It must be the teachers that are teaching so well that these students are getting such high grades. When in reality, most of us have to work for a living and go to school. So whatever the school tells you, take that with a grain of salt. If you have to work, you have to work. And I do have an article also on my blog about, I think, well, 9 or 13 different ways to pay for X-ray school. There's a lot of different things you can do besides working to pay for X-ray school. So that's the first question. How do I work full time and also get my degree? You have to mix and match. And I mean, I can really go down the rabbit hole on this one, but I won't. But one of the things that just popped in my mind is your question is kind of focused on income, right? I have to make an income to pay my bills while I go to school. Don't forget to look at the other side of that formula, which is your expenses. If you can reduce any expense, then you have to work less to pay it. So, just to be simplistic, maybe you own a car that costs you $500 a month. I did that once. And I was in school, I think, too. No, before X-ray school. I bought a shiny new Dodge truck, and it was like $550 a month. I'm like, yeah, I deserve this truck. And it was one of the dumbest things I've ever done. And the trade-in value was stupidly low because I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, if you have expenses that you can lower, therefore allowing you to make less money, therefore allowing you to work less to pay those bills, that's the same thing as getting additional hours on the clock to pay for bills, right? There's an inverse, well, no, it's not inverse. If you lower the bills, you lower the money needed to pay the bills. So direct correlation. So think about that too. What can you reduce out of your bill so that you work less? Reduce your food bill. Quit eating out so much. Quit drinking Starbucks coffees or what's those fancy drinks? Dutch Brothers and Sips, and there's all these soda fountain places popping up now. It's just a drink. Go get a generic 6-pack of Shasta from the grocery store for $2. So that's the working full time and getting your degree. Also, please help me figure out what radiologists in my area are making. I live in a certain part of Tennessee. So first thing you got to do is learn the difference between radiologists and radiographers. What you're referencing is the doctor, and I don't really think you're asking me what the doctors make. I think you're asking me what the X-ray techs make. And the problem with that question is it's going to vary based on a bunch of different stuff. Hospitals typically pay more than clinics. Doctors' offices can pay more if the doctor is generous. But then you've also got city versus country. You've got just all different kinds of things that dictate how much you can make in this job. But I will defer you to some of my blog posts that talk about how much money does an X-ray tech make, because the ARRT does an annual survey among all the members and ask them how much money they make and where they're at and what kind of facility they're in and what kind of degrees they have and all this stuff. And they put out this annual study. The problem with it is you can only access it if you have a membership. But I do have a link to one in the blog to 2019, which is getting a little older now. But they published one in 2019 to the public, so I'm able to share that one. And you can kind of look at that and you can still see, even though it's going to be older wages, you could compare the different modalities, like what an X-ray tech makes, ultrasound, CT, MRI, but you can also see them in different locations and with different amounts of education. There's another article that I wrote that talks about how to keep the most money in your pocket, because just like your income question, it's not only about how much money you make, it's about how much you spend. So when it comes to getting an X-ray job and talking about how much money you're going to make in that job, it's not necessarily about how much they're going to pay you per hour, because take California, for example, they may pay you $60 an hour to be an X-ray tech, but the cost of living is so high there that you're not going to be able to keep much after you pay your bills. It's more worth your time and sanity to take a job in, say, I don't know, Oklahoma, where the cost of living is lower and the income's lower, but it's at a higher percentage overall. You keep more in your pocket. So check out that article. And so there you go. I hope that helps answer some of your questions. If you have any more, leave them in the comments section or send me another. You sent this to me through my blog. So if anybody else has questions, you go to my blog, the radiologictechnologist.com. There's a contact me button at the top. It opens up a basic form where you put in your name and email address and a question. And I welcome these. I'm happy to answer them. I've been in the field for a long time. When I started, I couldn't get answers like this. So that's why I'm doing it, trying to help inform the next generation, make it easier on them to get the answers from someone who has done it and knows it. And so there you go. I'll end this here. You guys have a great day. If I can find it. Where to go? End.